Hi, I'm Nick. I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here, kind of. Give me an hour and then I'll be a lot more grateful. You know, I've been super busy today, so I haven't had like a ton of time to think about this, and that's really good, but I just am coming to terms with the fact that I don't have a plan on how I'm going to go about this. So I'm going to be as surprised as you are at what comes out, but I have my family here today, and so my prayer is that I can be honest and authentic. I've got my ex-wife, Crystal, over here, and two of my older daughters, Maddie and Olivia, and yeah, I guess this is kind of like a fifth step, which for those of you not in recovery, that's the confession step. So I'll just get the stuff out there that I'm a little nervous to get out there right from the beginning. So I have four kids actually. I have three daughters and a son, and each of my daughters has a different mom, which, being a white kid from Utah County, is kind of a little different, but but anyways, I just figure I'm going to get that out there right now so that I don't really have to talk about it later. But I grew up right down the road from here in North Orem, and I sponsor a lot of guys in the program, and I hear like some pretty crazy things of the way that people grow up, and I listen to some of these things, and I'm like, okay, you got a reason to drink, and I had every opportunity to succeed in life. I've got a loving family. My parents are still married. They still live up in North Orem, and I'm the oldest of six kids. I grew up playing a lot of sports, and we went on family trips every summer, and we lived just a good life, and I wasn't really around people who drank and stuff, but I remember being in ninth or 10th grade, and we're watching I was in a history class, and they're doing a show on Woodstock, and I remember one of these guys, and he's up there and he's drinking and doing all this, and I just remember thinking I want to do that. I don't know why I want to do that, but I want to do that. And I remember the first time that I drank, my friends and I went up camping up Provo Canyon, and we had I don't know how we got our hands on a handle of Papa vodka, and we got some Sunny Delight. We mixed it up in a water bottle, and got super sick, spinning, puking, and I just remember thinking the next morning, that was amazing. I can't wait to do that again, and from the first time I drank, that feeling owned me. I don't remember growing up and feeling like I didn't fit in and some of these things that you hear, but I remember when I drank, I loved the way that I felt. I could connect with people. I had so much fun, and it was a way that I felt like the real me could come out and play. Because growing up in North Orem in the 80s and 90s, what I learned was, I got to portray this certain image. I'm going to be at church on Sunday. My dad was always in, these church leadership positions, and so he was all right, well, I'll act the part on Sunday, but, the rest of the time I'm going to do what I want. And and even looking back then, I didn't care what the consequences were, and that's the thing about alcoholism is it's a disease, and for me, and I know for those who have the disease, it demands to be treated, and for me, alcohol became my God. Like, it was the ultimate counterfeit spiritual experience. When I read through the different promises in the book, specifically the 9-step promises, that's what alcohol does for me when it worked. Fear of people, gone. Fear of economic insecurity, gone. I can be right here, right now. I can, I'm making new best friends with whoever I'm drinking with. And, it's a feeling that I'm always chasing, trying to recapture, and when it works, it's amazing. And so that's what we did when I was in high school. Like, we would go camping, we would drink. Drugs weren't really around in Utah County back then. I mean, weed was, and I really put in effort to try to like it, and I hate it more than anything, and by the time I graduated high school, like, I still managed to do well in school. I graduated with like a 3.3 or something like that, and I got into the University of Utah, and I remember I started getting a bad reputation down here in Utah County, so I was like, you know what, the problem is the people down here. So if I move up to Salt Lake, like, there's going to be no problem. I didn't realize that I was the problem everywhere I go. Like, there I am. And so I moved up to the U, and I was really excited to be up there, and I joined a fraternity, and in fraternities, like, they major in drinking, so it was drinking around the clock, and it was a ton of fun. That's the truth of it. But I just remember, like, it became the most important thing in my life, and that's from a young age. I was like 18, 19 years old, and drinking became the most important thing in my life. It drove every decision that I made, and at the time, I'm completely blind to it. I can't see that that's driving those decisions, and so I had a girlfriend who was in a sorority. We dated for a couple years, and then Maddie came along. So, we decided to get married, and it was the first time that I was like, all right, I got to clean up my act. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to, try giving this church thing a shot and doing some of these things. And I remember crawling out of my skin. I remember just like, once I'm in my disease, I've got to have something. I've got this hole inside of me, and I am not comfortable being me. I need something to take me out of right here and right now. I need something to change the way that I feel. And so I remember I was like white knuckling this for about a year, and I just remember thinking, like, I need something. I need something to get me out of what I'm feeling. And so I end up having surgery on my mouth. And up to that point, like, anytime I'd had a surgery or pain pills were around, I'd always read the bottle, take 1 to 2. So I was like, all right, you got to take 4. Like, if you're going to, because the doctor's not going to give you something that's going to make you feel good, you got to take a little extra. And I'd always get sick, and so I was like, I don't like that, And so I remember I had surgery on my mouth, and they gave me Percocet 10s, and they were like these oval yellow, they looked like candy. And I remember the first time I took one, just the way that you were supposed to take them, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest feeling that I think I've ever had. And so I milked that surgery for as much as I could, and kept getting pain pills. And then after that, for about a year, I had a doctor who was writing me prescriptions for like 100 Lortabs a month, and I'd have some other pills with them, to enhance it. And so I'd always take it like after I got home from work, and I'm like, okay, if I just do it once a day, the way that the doctor's telling me to, like I can't get addicted to it, and I'm playing all these mind games with myself, and for a year I did this, and I thought that I had it under control, and this is like the story of my life, is always trying to like walk right to the edge, trying to manage this thing, like what's the maximum amount that I can do without it creating some huge problem, because like I gotta have this. I gotta have it, and I remember after doing this for like a year, I was at work one day, and I'm like 23 years old, and I took one at work, and I just remember it like it was the greatest feeling. It gave me all this energy, and it basically, it takes any negative emotion. For someone like me, this is what my experience was. It took those negative emotions, just pushed it down. It made me feel like I could conquer anything, and so like I quickly started doing that every single day, and started running out of those prescriptions pretty early, before I could get refills. And I was like, I wonder, I got to figure out a way where I can get more. So I got my hands on a prescription pad, and I was like, you know what, I should just write my own. Like, it's probably a good idea, and so I learned how to like write the Latin and all this, and I can't remember where exactly I learned it, and then I went around to different pharmacies, and I told the pharmacist that I was a student writing a paper on prescription fraud, and I was like, what do you look for when people are doing this, And so they started telling me like all the things that they looked for, and I was like, all right, perfect. Like I just won't do those things, and there won't be a problem, and so it got really out of control. That lasted for almost a year. I wrote these fake prescriptions. I wrote a couple hundred fake prescriptions, and I got so addicted to pain pills, like so insanely physically addicted. I'd never been physically addicted to something. And I just remember like towards the end, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get off of this. So, I'd come up with these plans. I'm like, okay, I'm going to taper off, and by this time, oxys were brand new. And so every pharmacist was like, anybody that's writing for oxy, like that's what we look for. And so I was writing Percocets and Lortabs. By the end, I was taking about 50 a day, which is a lot of Tylenol. And I was truly worried that like sometimes, when I was going to bed, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to wake up. And when I'd wake up in the morning, I would have this pounding headache, and I would just have to take, I think about 10 just to get the headache to go away. And then, they weren't working anymore. Like I wasn't getting high from it, and I'm just chasing it all throughout the day. And every day I'm like, okay, I'm going to taper back, and by the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I took more than the day before. Like I'm so screwed, and I'm living in this world completely alone. Like nobody knows about this. I'm completely like isolated, and, everything thankfully came crashing down around me. I got charged with, I think like 8 felony counts of fraud, and at the time I didn't realize how much trouble I was in, and I went to this, I ended up going to a detox for like 4 days, and then I went and detoxed at home by myself, and it's the sickest I've ever been. Like I didn't sleep for almost a month. It gets into your bones, into like especially in your legs, and I got down to like 165 pounds, and I got into this, my attorney was like, all right, you got to do some type of treatment so that, it looks good for the court. So I went to this outpatient treatment, and I'm like 23 years old, and like I have no idea like how deep I am into addiction by this time. And I went there, and they didn't introduce us to AA, but they had us do like these step packets, So I did the first 4 steps in their package, and I got some relief. And by the time I went to court, like it all just disappeared. they gave me a $230 fine and a plea in abeyance. It never hit my record, like, and my attorney was telling me how lucky I was, and I didn't realize like how bad that could have been at the time. And like the marriage fell apart, and I decided, I was like, I don't want to drink or use. Like, I truly don't want to do it, And so I went about 6 months where I felt good. But, for me, alcoholism, it's a disease, and I've only found 2 treatments that work for it. Working the 12 steps, that treats it. And that's the real treatment for it, because that brings God into my life, and that's ultimately what I'm looking for, is the spiritual experience. Or alcohol. Alcohol and drugs treat alcoholism. When those voices start getting loud, a drink or a pill or whatever, that quiets that down. That makes me feel normal, because when I stop drinking, I get crazier than when I am drinking, and that's the truth of this disease. And so, after about 6 months of just not doing anything, thinking that like, maybe this will just go away, maybe I just won't want to do these things anymore, it starts coming back, and I remember I was like, okay, if I go and drink like that, the pills, that's the problem. Like, if I drink, that's not a big deal, and I remember I went out and started drinking a little bit, and I was like, I so don't want to do this. And so I had a buddy who introduced me to some friends who were in like this singles ward up in Salt Lake. And I was like, all right, well, I'll give this thing a shot, So I dove into church in this singles ward, and, I found some real relief for the first time, But I didn't understand that that I've got this thing inside of me that blocks me off from the Spirit, my fears, my resentments, the conduct in relationships, the unfinished amends and all of the harms that I've done, and that's what the 12 steps take care of. But at that point in time, I found this spiritual experience in church, but I still had all of these other things, specifically the fear. Fear has driven my life for so many years, for most of my life. Fear has been the main thing that drives me. And, so I'm going to church. I'm having fun with all these friends. I meet Crystal in the ward. We start dating. We date for like a year. We decide to get married, and like I'm feeling as good as I've ever felt, And after we get married and the realities of life set in, this voice starts up in my head saying, you'll never be enough. Like, you can't provide the type of life, and all of these fears and insecurities start cropping up, and it's that same thing where this ball of anxiety starts to live right here in my chest, and this ball of anxiety, the only way to get rid of that is with a drink or a pill, and I could feel myself, I knew I wanted to go back to the pills, and I was like, I so don't want to do this, and this is in like about 2008, 2009, somewhere around there, and I hear about a doctor who is prescribing this new drug called Suboxone, and I was like, oh, well, this is like the cure for addiction. That's the way that they sold it, anyways, so I go and talk to this doctor, and he puts me on Suboxone and Klonopin and Ambien, and I'm like, I love this guy. He's making me really comfortable, and I'm like, and I'm sober, and that, that's truly what I believed, I truly believed that taking these pills, because I'm not out abusing it or getting loaded on it, like I'm sober this way, and what I didn't realize is those things, I like to call them my little God blockers, because anytime I feel a negative emotion or any type of discomfort, boom, pop a pill, and it makes that go away. But what I didn't realize is that it made me completely numb. Like I was just like this. I was never up or down, you know, and I would look around at other people and the way that they connected with their kids and in their marriage and things like that. And I'm like, are they faking that? Like, I don't feel any of those things, you know, like I just don't feel. And so what I found is that when I would drink, then I could feel, you know, and so I would get in these cycles where after work, you know, I'd swing by a bar on my way home. There's this arcade game called Golden Tee. It's a golf game, and I'd play a round of Golden Tee. I'd have like 6 to 8 drinks, hit that sweet spot, go home, and then I'm ready. Like, all right, now I feel like I can function. You know, I feel like I'm alive, and you know, I'd go through these cycles where I would do this, and then I'd be like, all right, I got to quit. I can't do this. I don't want to go down this road, you know, and so I'd quit, you know, and I'd just up the pills. And I'm like, see, I can quit just fine, you know? So after a couple months, you know, I'm driving down the road, and the book talks about it, you know, you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden this thought comes like, oh, I should get a drink, you know? And I always listen to that voice. Like, I've always listened to it. You know, I always think it's me making decisions, but I got this voice in my head that's like, hey, you should go get a drink. And I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's go do it. You know, and so I would go and, you know, like I would go in this cycle and do this, you know, and I had this idea that, like, if I'm going to church, if I'm, you know, and at the time, like, my family's in the church and I've got a calling and I'm doing all those things, you know, so I'm like, like nobody's getting hurt here, you know, like this is what I need to feel okay. Like I need a drink to feel okay. And so, you know, I'm like, if I have a few beers on the golf course, like I don't understand what the big deal is, you know, and you know, I'm living in this delusion and not seeing the truth of the cycle that I've had for so many years, you know, and so, you know, I also had this job at this time. You know, my family had this business, and they'd had it my whole life, and I was helping to run this business, you know, and it just slowly got more and more insane, you know, and my work became part of the addiction because I would constantly work. I would always work at night, you know, and on weekends, and because I was unable to be present, you know, and so I was like, if I'm working, nobody can ask me to do anything, you know, and my family is the one who's paying the price for, you know, all of this because I'm there physically, but I can't show up emotionally. And so, you know, as the work got crazier and crazier, you know, that took me out of having to ever be present when I'm at home. And, you know, it got to the point where in like 2017, like I knew that this business was going to close, you know, and I didn't feel like I had anybody that I could talk to, you know, and I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders at that time. And so, you know, I just remember getting to a point where like the drinking was like getting more and more, and I was like, I got to stop doing this, you know. I couldn't hit the sweet spot anymore. Like I was going from not feeling anything to like having way too much, you know, and I didn't like the way that it felt, and I didn't like what I was doing, and so I was like, I gotta quit, you know. And so after like 2 weeks of quitting, I watched this movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, and and when I watched this movie, you know, like all the cocaine and everything they were doing, I was like, that's how I should quit drinking. I need to find some cocaine, you know. And in my mind, like, this made sense. And I was like, I don't even know anybody who does any drugs or anything. And so I was like, I wonder how I can, like, figure this out, you know. And I remember a couple of weeks later, like, I go into this hotel room, and my sister and my cousin are doing some cocaine, and I'm like, holy shit, I can manifest drugs. Like, this is crazy, you know. And you know, the crazy thing is like, I did never drink again, you know, so it did cure the drinking. But but it opened up a whole different door, you know, and I know we're in AA, so I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, I don't think. But you know, and that brought the bottom up real quick. You know, that owned me. You know, I've never been owned like that before. You know, where it got to the point where if you're standing between me and that drink, like, you got to go, because that next drink is the most important thing to me. You know, and so, you know, we ended up closing that business down in 2018, and my whole identity was tied up in that. You know, everything to that point was outside in. You know, I was using, like, if I drive the right car, maybe I'll feel good about myself, you know, and if my family looks this way, you know, and we've all got to portray this certain thing that isn't real, you know, because maybe one day it will be, you know, and you know, this job gives me some identity and value in my life, you know, and this thing goes away, and there was part of me that was so excited for it to go away, and there was part of me that was just absolutely devastated by it, you know, and I just remember sitting there, and I'm like I don't even know who I am. Like I don't even know who I am, and my thinking is so twisted from everything that I've been doing that I can't see which way is up, you know. And you know, Crystal found out about the drugs, and well, after the business closed down, I decided it'd be a good idea to maybe sell some drugs, you know. And I was like, I don't really know people that do this, you know, but I went out and I bought a bunch, and she found them, and then she flushed them, you know, and it was about $10,000 worth of stuff, you know, and you know, it was a little crazy, you know. It was a little crazy, but you know, and she was like, you know what, this is insane. Like, I'm getting out of here, you know. And I started down the road of, like, you know what, I really need to quit. And up to that point, I'd never heard of AA. I'd never heard of 12-step. I'd never heard of these things, these places, you know. And so, you know, I could go for about a month, and then all of a sudden I'm starting back up, you know. And I feel like I'm going insane. So I go and I get a therapist, you know, and I'm like, I don't know what happened to me when I was a little kid that I can't remember, like, why I'm so crazy, but, like, I can't quit doing this, and I don't understand. Like, I am genuinely, like, trying to stop as hard as I can, because I know that I'm going to lose everything, and I always go back to it, you know, and I don't understand why, you know. And so I like go to do this EMDR out at Thanksgiving Point. I'm doing, like, these meditation, like breathing meditation that's supposed to, like, I don't know what the hell it's supposed to do, but you know, like, all of these things, trying to figure out a way to quit, you know, and I wasn't, like, none of it worked, you know. And so I remember I was like, well, maybe if I, like, buy a new house, you know, it'll be like a new beginning for the family, and we can get everybody back together, you know. And so I buy this new house, and you know, I'm completely out of my mind at this point, you know, and still trying to keep one foot in one world and one foot in another. But, you know, that voice that is speaking some type of reason to me is just getting quieter and quieter, because I'm doing everything I can to shut that voice down, you know. And I remember one night the kids came over, and I'd been up for a couple days, you know, and I don't know if you guys have ever been up for a couple days and, like, you sit down to write a text message, like, that's the fastest way to fall out. Like, if you've been, you know, to just pass it, like, I don't know what it is about sitting down to concentrate like that, but they were going to bed, and I sat down to write a text message, and I passed out, and they couldn't find me. And so they called their mom, and she came over. And I remember, like, I have this image burnt into my mind. Like, she came over, she wakes me up, she's like, I'm taking the kids, like they're gone, and I remember watching the three of them, the back of their heads just walk out the front door, and I was like, I'm screwed. Like, I don't even know what the point is. And I threw up my hands at that point, and I completely surrendered to the addiction. And I was like, I don't care where you take me, because I'm done trying to fight this, because I can't quit, and I don't know of any way to get out of this thing, and it was crazy. It was like I had a bull ring through my nose, and there was like a red carpet rolled out to hell. It was like, you're coming with us, and we're just going to stroke your ego the whole way there, and I had this idea that if I didn't see or talk to my family, then I wouldn't be hurting them, and so I didn't really see or talk to them for it was like a year and a half. And in Bill's story, it talks about how he reached a point where he didn't draw another sober breath for a few years. From that day when they walked out the door, I didn't draw another sober breath. That was in, I think, December of 2018 until the May of 2020. If I was awake, I was out of my mind, and I just got to a place where I was like, I don't care, and things got really crazy, and, there was a lot of, things got really crazy, and I just got to the place where I was like, you know what, if I dig a hole deep enough, maybe I can just never come back from this. Like, maybe I will either just die or I'll end up in prison, but I'll never have to face the things that I've done, because I hate myself so much, and I don't believe that I can ever move through these things, And thankfully, God stepped in, in May of 2020. I had an experience where, I'm sitting in a house out in the middle of West Valley. It's the middle of the night, and I have like one of these bright light experiences, and I see and feel that I'm going to die, and it was more the feeling of it, and I don't know how long it lasted or whatever, and it terrified me. And I remember like coming to, and I was like, I don't know what that is that I just experienced, but I know I never want to go back there, and up to that point I had convinced myself that morality wasn't real, there was no such thing as right or wrong, that there, all of these things, and so at that point I knew that for every decision that you make, there is a consequence, positive, negative, it doesn't matter, it's just you take the action, you get the result. And, it didn't matter how numb I got, I couldn't get that feeling to go away, and so about a week after this, I decided, I was like, all right, I gotta do something about this, so I called up my parents, and I ended up going into Foothill, and I went there for 4 days, and I had no idea like what addiction was or what it meant to get sober, and then I ended up, after 4 days there, I went to this like crazy prison alternative commune up in Salt Lake, where they shave your head and they give you clothes that don't fit, and like you can't talk about your past, and like all the, they work you 7 days a week, and I'm just like, what kind of crazy Twilight Zone have I just gone into, and like they don't have any of the solution like what we have in AA. It's just, we're going to remove you from this and we're going to teach you how to act again, and it's a 30-month program. And so I went there and I was like, I guess this is what my life looks like now, because my my thinking had gotten so twisted that like I'd forgotten what regular life even looked like or felt like, and after I'd been there for about 6 months, and I had gotten to a place where I was like, you know what? Like, if this is what it means to get, to get sober or whatever, I guess I'll just stay here for the 30 months. And in about 6 months, like, I started getting this voice that was like, you got to leave, you know. And I remember I went and talked to the people who ran the place. Like, I'm telling them, I'm like, I feel like I got to leave, you know. And they're like, that's just your voice, or that's just, you know, your head messing with you. Like, you got to push through that. And you know, I remember one Sunday afternoon, like, I leave, you know, and I'm on 7th East and South Temple and downtown, and I remember I'm walking down South Temple, and it was almost an out-of-body experience where I'm like watching myself walk down South Temple, and there's a voice inside of me that's like, what are you doing? Because it's one of these places, like, if you leave, you're done. You can't go back, you know, and so I came down here to Utah County, you know, and I was 6 months clean and sober, and I remember the next day my parents both went to work, and I'm sitting at their house. Like, I have no phone, no wallet, no ID, no clothes. Like, I've got nothing. I just had the clothes on my back that I came down here with. And I just remember thinking, like, what have I done? You know, this is insane. Like, I can't even fathom how to climb out of this hole, you know. And so I decided to go into a treatment program just to be around other people who, like, understood, because I'd forgotten how to act in the world, you know. I'd completely forgotten how to act. And so I get into steps, and on my 3rd day of treatment, I'm driving there, and I get to the light right before the treatment, and that voice comes up, hey, you should run up to Salt Lake and see what your friends are doing. I'm like, you know what? It's a really good idea. We're going to, you know, because, like, when I'm in untreated alcoholism, at some point, you know, I am going to have a mental blank spot, like it talks about in the book, like, where I can't recall the pain of a week or a month or even a week ago, you know, and that thought comes and I go, because that's what I do, you know. And I remember the next day was Thanksgiving. I show up at like 8 in the morning, you know, and I walk in, and my parents are like, dude, like, what the hell? Like, for real, you know. And they were like, why? You know. And I just remember sitting there, and I was like, I don't know why. Like, I literally, you know, I couldn't come up with a reason why I did it, you know. And when I found the big book a couple months later, I remember reading this part where it says, as strange as it is when when talking about the thinking that precedes the first drink, when an alcoholic truly has no idea more than you do why they do it, you know. And I remember reading that, and I was like, thank God I'm not insane, you know, because, like, I feel like I've just lost my mind. But, you know, that was in November of 2020. My sobriety date is December 31st, 2020. You know, from that point on, every weekend I would relapse, and then I'd show back up to treatment. I'd tell them, like, hey, you know, because I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't not do it. And, you know, I got to a place where I was like, you know what, like, the pain of being sober is worse than what the consequences will be if I go back out, you know. And so I went back out for like 6 days, you know, and it quit working, you know. I couldn't get the magic back. You know, I couldn't, that ball of anxiety just kept getting tighter and tighter, and it didn't matter what I did. I couldn't get anything to take it away. So on December 31st, I went into residential treatment in Payson. And, you know, it was over the holiday weekend. There was 4 of us in there. There were no groups, you know, and for the first time I reached like this emotional hell, you know, this place where I was, you know, the big book talks about it as the jumping off place. Where I couldn't live sober and I couldn't live drinking, you know, and I was like, I am so screwed. I don't know what to do. And the only relief I could get was sleeping. And so I remember it was 10:30 in the morning on like the 4th day that I was in there, and I couldn't sleep anymore. And I remember specifically thinking, like, I wish I'd brought a book, something to put me to sleep. And I roll over, you know, and they've got these blue books that look like other blue books, you know, and it's called the Big Book. You know, I had no idea what this book was, and I knew that the Bible was called the Good Book, so I was like, did these alcoholics like write their own Bible? Like this has got to be boring. Like if I read 5 pages of this thing, like I'm sure it's going to put me out, And so I start reading in Bill's story, and he's talking exactly how I feel inside. I start reading through this. He is talking about how I think. He's talking about how I feel. He's talking about how I drink. And I'm like, how does whoever this person is know exactly how I'm feeling, And they put words to things that I had felt my entire life and never been able to identify, And I remember, I grew up, I'd always lived in the church and around the church, and I'd always professed that I believed in God and all of these things, but I'd never had an experience with God. I knew how to give it lip service, and I remember reading in Bill's story, and for the first time in I don't even know how long, I felt a little bit of hope, and what I know today, that's the sunlight of the Spirit, and so I at the Crazy Commune, we would watch all these motivational videos and stuff, and so I remember I'd seen this one, the Navy SEAL general on Make Your Bed. So I was like, okay, I'm in this residential rehab, it's the middle of COVID. They weren't taking meetings in, they weren't taking us to meetings, so I had like no idea what AA was, I had no idea what any of this recovery stuff was. But I was like, okay, I can get up, I can make my bed, and I can read from this alcoholic Bible. Like that's the best that I can do. And so every morning I would get up and I would do that, and I started to feel some hope. I started to feel like, what, maybe there's a way out of this thing, because they go through and in the big book it outlines the disease of alcoholism, and then it outlines the treatment for it, and for the first time, I saw that when that voice comes in my head, for 24 years, I've never been able to say no to it. I've been able to put together different periods of sobriety, but all it was me just hoping that this thing was gone, and I was distracted by other things, but once I'm left alone with me, I can't sit there without putting something in my body to take to make me feel something different, and so my therapist in there, she had 35 years with sobriety, and so she got me right into the work, and I was in that residential treatment for 24 days, and by the time I left there, I'd worked a few steps, and that obsession to use, that desire to go out and do those things was lifted from me. And it was the first time that had been lifted from me in 24 years. I had no idea how much that was driving everything, every decision that I was making, and when I got out of there, Casey had found AA while I was in residential treatment. He'd gotten into the steps in the book. Our sobriety dates are like 3 weeks apart, and we moved into sober living together, and we started doing everything together. I remember the room that we lived in was like this teeny room, like I could reach over and touch his bed, and it wasn't even big enough for a TV or anything. And I just remember there were nights where we'd just sit there and laugh. I'm on this bed that's like 4 inches too short, and like we just sit there and laugh, and it was like this weight had been lifted, like I'm free for the first time in years and years, and so we just dove into AA. Neither of us had lived in Utah County. We didn't know anybody down here. And so we were like, well, whatever, let's give this AA thing a shot, and we got big into speaker tapes. We listened to tons of speaker tapes, and I just remember thinking like, okay, I've got to like indoctrinate myself with this stuff. And a speaker tape is kind of like an AA conference talk for those of you that aren't in AA. But no, I mean, they're amazing, and we just started hitting meetings all the time, and I started to hear the message that people were saying, and so I remember I started to gain this belief that, I've got this huge mountain of problems out here, these relationships with family and like, well, I mean, I went into sober living. I was homeless. Like I had nothing, and so I was like, I had heard, if you focus your time and attention on getting a sponsor, doing the steps, getting into service, helping other people, all of these other things will just start to work themselves out, and I was like, well, I got nothing to lose. Let's jump into this, and so I remember, I'm like 2 months sober, and I'd been getting this feeling like, just focus on doing AA and your step work and all this stuff that they've got you doing in treatment, and don't worry. I had like 17 charges, and I was looking at, I was in some trouble. And so I remember, like, I'm going to court, and the day of court, like, I start freaking out. I'm like, I haven't done anything. Like, I got this public defender, I'm probably screwed. And 30 minutes before I'm going to see the judge, they come over and they offer me a deal, plead guilty to 2 misdemeanors and no probation, no fines, and it was like God just was like, all right, we're just going to move that out of the way, and he just started moving things, and it's been, it's been absolutely amazing. Casey and I just dove into service and AA, and we would hit at least 1 meeting a day together for the first 18 months, if not 2, like it was our life, and I remember that first year, my theme for the year was just building a foundation. I need to build a foundation, and so I just dove into this thing, and, I wasn't sure what was going to come from it, but, it's been absolutely amazing, and I've got a few different amends stories that I want to talk about. So when I was about a year sober, I'd been doing the financial amends, specifically to my family. Like, I'm going to pay you what's left over, instead of like, I'm going to pay what's right for me to pay you, and then I'll figure out the rest. And I remember when that shifted, Crystal and I had a conversation, and it was like, okay, here's what I can do. I'm going to pay this amount of money. And I was like, all right, God, I can live for 2 months. After this, like, I'm screwed. I'm not going to be able to pay my rent, and so I'm kind of like, all right, God's got to hook it up, and so, I went back and I made an amends to the church. I found that I don't appreciate free gifts, and I just spit on that. And so I was like, you know what, I'll never be at peace until I go and make that right. So at that same time, I'd started down this road, and so I get to like the 2-month mark, and I'm like, all right, I can't pay my rent, God. What are we going to do here, And I remember I'm like doing my prayer and meditation in the morning, and the answer is like, go talk to the church. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go ask for help. Like, that's, but I went and I asked for help, and the church was willing to help me, and I'm like, okay, like, God, I need some money here, and so then the service position comes up to help with the Alano Club and get it going. And I'm like, I've never been to an Alano Club. I'm a year sober. I don't have any construction skills, so I can't help do anything in here, and I have no money, and I burnt all my connections. So like, I don't know why you want me to help, but what I'm been told in AA is like, you never say no, So I showed up and started coming to this service commitment, and during that time, like, I'm talking to the bishop, and he's like, so like, what's your plan? And I'm like, God's telling me to be patient, and and I'm like, am I going crazy here? Because these are, and so I remember one day I'm coming in to our meeting that we were having here to get the Alano Club started, and I had like the most overwhelming thought, you need to talk to Corey about a job. And I pull in, and Corey's standing there in the parking lot by himself. So I go up to him and I was like, Corey, like, do you know anyone that's hiring? Because I got this feeling like I need to ask you about a job. And like I remember he's wearing his mirrored sunglasses, so I can't really tell what the expression is on his face. But he just sat there for a minute, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I pissed him off, or, And he's like, one of our main people is leaving tomorrow. Like, you would be perfect for this, because the business that I work in now it's the same thing that I've done my whole life, and like, well, I swore I'd never move to Utah County. I swore I'd never go into church again, and I swore I'd never work in that industry. And in recovery, I've done all of those things. God's like, you have no idea what's good for you. Like, you've never known what the best thing for you is, so like, just keep your mouth shut. And so, I started in on this job, and it was so crazy because it took everything that I've ever done. I've had, I worked for my family for almost all of my life. I helped my sister run a website, which was exactly like the website that, we launched there. And then at the crazy commune, I was on this moving company where they taught me all about moving furniture. And so I go in to this job, and it's all three of those things wrapped into one thing. And I'm like, how can this be? And about a month before this, I'd gotten a new sponsor, and I'd just done another 4th step with him. And on this 4th step, I had this guy from the bank who had let me go from my family's business. They'd asked me to come back on and run it. Like, when it was closing down, the bank owned it, and I was out of my mind, and he let me go, and I knew that I needed to make it right. It never sat well with me. And so on my 4th step, it was dude from the bank. Like, I have no idea who this guy is. I don't know how to find him or anything. Well, I walk in the very first day of that job, and Stacy comes in, and she's like, oh, I've met you. Tyler from the bank introduced me to you, a few years ago, because apparently they were going to buy the business that my family had, and I'd met with her and completely forgotten about that. And so I was able to go and make that right, and it's been one of the greatest gifts of my sobriety that I get to work with all of these guys in recovery. I get my daughters are able to come and work with me. I get to be able to watch how Corey and Stacy live their life, and it's such an amazing example, and the gifts that come in recovery are absolutely amazing, I've been working for a few years on just trying to rebuild relationships with my kids and my family, and today it's amazing. The relationship that I have with my kids is something that I never dreamed would be possible. I didn't think that I was capable of connecting with people on a real and authentic level. Today, the most important thing in my life is my relationship with God. Like, hands down, the most important thing. I kind of view it like, have you ever seen the sun rays coming through the clouds? I view it like each one of us has a sun ray coming into us. That's God's love. And I've got all these bricks that block me off from it. My fears, my resentments, unfinished business, things where I've wronged people and I haven't made that right, and that blocks me off. And the idea that I'd always had before was that God's love had to be earned. I didn't believe it was just there. What AA has taught me is how to access God's love, how to access that spirit, how to live in the sunlight of that spirit, and what I love about AA is that there is as much service as you want in these rooms. There are meetings all day long. There is tons of service. and for alcoholics and addicts, like our problem is selfishness and self-centeredness, so when we can get into service, it makes it so that I'm not thinking about me, and the more that I'm not thinking about me, the happier I am. AA has taught me how to let go of results. Like, the results are none of my business. AA teaches me how to just show up each day, put in my best effort, and whatever happens, happens. And by doing this, particularly like with my family, just showing up, okay, I'm just going to show up, and with my kids, it started one day a week on Tuesday nights, just showing up, and we'd sit down and we'd play Uno or something, and they're like, what the heck is going on? We haven't seen you for a couple years, and I'm like, this is so weird. I remember doing this for it was like a year, every Tuesday, just show up, and then I had this idea, like, all right, align yourself with your family, and I was like, I don't understand what that fully means, but it was be home when they're home, be available, and so I started doing this thinking, because I knew that, like, I could never be at peace until I at least did as much as I could to make things right with my family, so I started doing this. And after about 6 months of doing this and just being available, it was like the doors just blew open. All of a sudden I'm doing stuff with my kids like 4 or 5 days a week, all of their sports stuff. We're going and we're doing stuff. We're genuinely having, a ton of fun. Maddie gets home from her mission and we all start doing stuff together, and having to sit them down and tell them that they got another sibling was one of the hardest amends that it was one of the hardest things, and that's been a journey in and of itself, and it's one that I've been walking for a little over 3 years, I've been showing up every weekend for that little girl, right before this, I'd just taken her back out to Willow where she lives with her grandparents, and she came and stayed with me last night, but she comes and stays with me every weekend now. We get together there's an open door invitation with the kids that they want to come, and it's it's just been a crazy ride. But anyways, I'm out of time, so that's all I got. Thank you.